G'day guys, welcome back to the Set of Six NRL or maybe Rugby League podcast, probably a name we'll have to assess in the off-season. But today we're here with six great tackles with our regular co-host. We've got Oliver, Ozza from NRL in my opinion, or Rugby League in my opinion.
Yeah.
Oh, how are you, brother?
I'm good. Get that bloody N out of here. We hate the N word.
We hate the N word. And I said that,
aspects.
And someone messaged me and said, "You're racist. That's not funny." And I said,
"Racist for hating the N word."
Even if it was meant in that term, then it's the complete opposite because you hate the word. So people need to relax these days, and that's what we are here to allow you to do. So sink into your sofa chair with a packet of chips, being the fat shit you are. No, I'm kidding, guys. We've got six great tackles today. We're going to talk all things Broncos. We're going to talk Shane Flanagan being approved to return, 5-minute sin bin. We're going to talk a little bit about Will Chambers, his situation, give our tips and assess the upcoming preliminary finals. And then last week we'll give our most improved, we'll give our most valuable for each team. So straight off the bat, we've got the Brisbane Broncos. That's what we'll discuss. Bit of a media beat up, in my opinion, these last couple of weeks with the Broncos. And I say that because at the end of the day, they did finish top 8.
Yeah.
And, I'll use our team because we're Titans fans. That way we can't upset... Well, we upset a very small amount of people because we don't have many fans, unfortunately. But... all our players are on holidays right now, man. They're overseas, they're drinking, they're putting it all over their Instagram stories, and they got the wooden spoon. At the end of the day, the Broncos had a humiliating loss, but they still finished top 8. They qualified for the finals, which is every team's aim. They were better than 50% of other teams. And the reason I'm sort of bringing this all up, man, is because the Parramatta Eels beat them 58-0. Great week. Yeah. One of the best weeks in Eels modern history. The very next week, 6 days later, they didn't score a point and almost had a similar scoreline put on them by the Storm. So you think the newspapers would blow up, right? Let's investigate. Were they on the pokies last week, perhaps, after the win? But there's been nothing. Do you see this as a bit of a beat up towards the Broncos?
Oh, and I understand why it's a beat up towards the Broncos as well, because we got to think about the Broncos are probably the most recognisable, arguably the most recognisable, and are definitely the most profitable brand in the NRL.
Yep.
A lot of non-NRL fans, if you tell them, name 3 NRL teams, the Broncos are likely one of them. So to get that mainstream attention, the media would be loving this, that there is a problem for the Broncos because they're thinking, let's nitpick every nook and cranny of this situation because we're going to get good exposure for this because it is the Brisbane Broncos. I even found myself... it was last week I found, because obviously when I do my posts, I do the thumbnails, as most people know, and I have the background of the colour of the team. And I found myself a lot of the time scrolling to that Broncos background and getting the Broncos logo. And after a few days, I realised, wow, I've been coming back to this same template a fair bit over the past few days. I've almost turned into a Broncos news page.
Yep.
I found, and I don't know if you felt the same way with your page as well, but there has definitely been a lot to cover with the Broncos lately. Not only with the recent news that we'll talk a little bit about with Matt Lodge being rumoured as the next Broncos captain, but obviously the fallout from the 58-0 loss to Parramatta, the players who are reportedly on the out or are on their last warning or whatever. There is just a lot to cover, but I feel like it's been drawn out a little bit too much now by the mainstream media.
I absolutely agree because I've had those exact same second thoughts that you had. I thought, wow, I'm talking about the Broncos or I'm slamming them a little bit too much here. Like you said, one of the most recognizable brands in sport, particularly in Australia. And I think if anyone disagreed with that, they'd be a fool. They'd be kidding themselves. The Broncos are so recognizable because they expect greatness. They've literally always had greatness. They rarely miss the top 8. So I think they themselves know more than anyone else. They don't need a headline on the newspaper to remind them that this year was below standard for them. Matty Johns, I consider him one of the greatest minds in our game. He tipped him for a premiership. So that sort of shows where they were supposed to project to. And even though they finished high, they did miss what could have been. Who captains them? Because as you said, Matt Lodge, a bit of controversy. I don't think him. I think at this stage it's Matt Gillette. I think if Alex Glenn is re-signed, I appoint him captain.
I think right now It's Alex Glenn, all right? So the two other candidates you just mentioned, Matt Gillett and Matt Lodge. Matt Gillett would be the perfect option if he wasn't amongst the players who I believe went out on the pokies the night before the Parramatta game. That does tarnish his credentials for captain a little bit, I believe. I'm not sure if Alex Glenn was caught up in that or Matt Lodge. Matt Lodge, though, a bit too young. We've not really seen, at least on the field, leadership capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings him into question a little bit. However, Alex Glenn, I believe, is he the fifth most capped Bronco? Although he hasn't been amazing this year, he has been one of their better players, I'd say, for the most part.
Yep.
And you'd sort of lean towards him. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, it's interesting because on NRL.com right now, Oz, there's an article saying that they're considering promoting Patrick Carrigan. I believe he's a teenager, if not he's 20, very young, into the leadership group. Now, he's played 19 games and I find that completely false. I would assume the club is unhappy with the Matt Lodge headlines, and someone from within the club has told NRL media that to create a distraction and a diversion because they're not happy with the Matt Lodge coverage, obviously. I just don't see a way that a kid that's played 19 games can be a part of a leadership group. And I think if we look at the Penrith Panthers and Ivan Cleary with his leadership group, it doesn't work. You need to have your couple of vocal leaders out there.
Yeah, and I think as well, when talking about a leadership group, I think we've got it wrong over the past couple of years, like what Ivan had at the Tigers and the Panthers, where you shouldn't appoint a leadership group. There shouldn't be a set official leadership group. It should just sort of be this natural idea of who the leaders are within the side because they act upon it. They're not appointed leaders, they are leaders. You know, for most clubs, although they don't have a specific leadership group, you can tell who the leaders are in that side. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And you can tell on the field, and from what players say off the field, it shouldn't be a role somebody is appointed. It should be, you know, a naturally given role, an unspoken role, where people just sort of unanimously agree that that person is a leader within that squad.
And I absolutely agree with that. And I would make the argument to anyone listening, if they would disagree, that Matt Lodge is that currently for the Broncos. They do have a rather young forward pack. And although he's sort of inexperienced himself, he does have a past and something to, I guess, to show people what not to do, if nothing else. Statistically, he is a leader on the field in defense and offense, and I've got no doubt he's also putting in the hard yards at training. But we have to remember, when you become a captain, the additional media responsibilities are huge. There will be media coverage, and I can tell you right now, the newspapers and the nightly news will not say, "Congratulations, Matt Lodge, you've turned your life around. You're now the captain. We're really happy for you, young man." They will be, "This is disgusting. This is what he did just 2 years ago." And it'll all bring it back for Matt Lodge. And I think for a club, and particularly an individual trying to move on from that past, I think it could be poor for his mental health if he was appointed captain.
Yeah, and just to add, I don't want to get into it too much, but I believe the people involved in that situation a couple of years ago have actually sort of given their blessing for Matt Lodge to come back into the NRL and try to, I guess, you know, have a refresher, restart. So I believe, and now I'm not certain that they have, but I believe if that is the case, then we can't really use that as an argument to stop him from becoming captain. However, even if that situation didn't happen, right now, from what I see personally on the field, I don't think he is the best fit because of age. Because yes, he has shown, you know, in the statistics and the way he plays, certain leadership qualities, but we're just not seeing the complete package yet.
Yep.
In terms of a leader. So I think even if it's just, you know, momentarily for a season or two, if they can hold on to him, Alex Glenn, but he might not even be at the club next year. So you might have to go with Matt Lodge, just because Matt Gillett as well was, you know, out on the pokies the night before a game now, which of course isn't against the rules. However, it is a bit of a morality issue. So yeah, they're in a pickle, the Broncos. Look, if I'm being honest, they don't have a true out-and-out captain, someone that would be the perfect fit for the role. But based off of current circumstances, you'd have to lean towards Alex Glenn.
And a popular choice online, and I don't agree with this one, Oz, but I wanted to get your opinion as well, is Anthony Milford. Now, I don't think he's the right choice because I think Milford's still finding his own game himself. let alone
Well,
additional responsibilities.
you got to think about it as well. The board aren't happy with him right now. The club isn't happy with Anthony Milford right now. Why in the hell would they appoint someone captain that they don't believe in? That's just going to create
Right.
more problems. Yeah, he's reportedly been told that he's down to his last chance. If he doesn't start improving at the start of 2020 or in preseason, then he's gone. We could be sitting here in June, maybe even earlier in May, talking about an Anthony Milford mid-season move to another club, similar to what happened with Cody Nikorima,
Yep.
because apparently he is on that last chance. So why would you appoint someone captain who is on that last chance? I don't know why.
Last thing before we move on to tackle 2, where does Milford play next year for you? Do you put Asako at fullback and trust him there, or do you keep Milford there?
I keep Milford there, and they do need to bring in a half.
Yep.
He has shown better qualities at fullback since moving back there. He has improved. I think don't fix what currently is working. He hasn't been perfect, but he's been better than when he was in the halves. A bit less pressure. We're hearing that apparently Darius Boyd might play in the centres or start next season training with the reserve grade squad. So
Yeah.
they will need a half to go in there and fit with Tommy Dearden. But I feel like we've talked about the Broncos half situation plenty.
Yeah.
We know our thoughts on it, so we won't delve too much into it. But, bring in a new half and keep Milford at fullback.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's move on to tackle 2 now. Shane Flanagan is approved to return. Not as a head coach, as an assistant coach. So let's go ahead and go through every single club and let's assess his chances there, because on one hand, you have a head coach as an assistant coach. How can that be a bad thing? On another, you don't want too many Chiefs. You need to have your Chief and your Indians, obviously. So let's go through. Brisbane Broncos, I'm going to say no. I think Seabold's too well established up there. He's going on his own path.
Yeah, they don't need to run the risk of adding any more problems up there at Red Hill. And, 2 leaders butting heads is probably the worst thing they could ask for right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is an interesting one. I'm going to say no for the Canberra Raiders.
No, they don't need him right now.
Yeah, you're right.
What's happening right now, he's currently working. I've only heard good things about the staff at the Canberra Raiders as well, especially Brett White.
Yeah.
So I don't think we shuffle that at all.
I'll tell you what, on a quick note, Whitey deserves a lot more credit. He's the Raiders' defensive coach. And I'm going to go in and get the statistics, but I'd say they've improved in that area tremendously this year, and he deserves a lot more credit than what he's getting for. This is the club I think he probably fits best at here, Oz. Cronulla Sharks. And not in the fact that I think Dean Pay is a poor coach. I don't think he's the best coach, but I think Shane Flanagan has that element. He could attract a couple more stars to the club, potentially some Cronulla Sharks players even, because the Bulldogs are desperate to lure talent. We have to agree on that.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely bring a name value to the club. And if I'm being honest, from what we've seen, while Flanagan was at the Sharks, his relationship with his players was amazing. Any club that Flanagan ends up other than the Sharks, there's at least going to be 1 or 2 players possibly looking into a move to Shane Flanagan's club. And who is a team that could do with some, a couple of fresh faces? The Bulldogs. Mm-hmm. And they also have the money to do so. So that would make sense.
Yeah, particularly if now you bring that up, Andrew Fafita actually give him his Dally M Prop of the Year award with a nice message. Thanks for everything, Flano. Sharks, I don't think we need to discuss that. That's not really a possibility.
No, I don't think the NRL would really want that. And I think we'd find if Flanagan did end up at the Sharks, on paper, Morris would be the head coach, Flanagan would be the assistant, but I think behind the scenes, we would see a bit of a difference. And that's unfair on John Morris as well.
Particularly, I was about to say that. I think that's very unfair on him. Gold Coast Titans. Now, I'm going to say no, only because Justin Holbrook has just signed Flano's former assistant coach, Jim Dimmick. So it's a little bit, you know what I mean? That's a little bit disrespectful to Jim.
Yeah, and he really can't because he's just brought Jim Dimmick as well. So it's really, what's the word I'm looking for? It's really not needed from the Titans. And you know what? I think we should just leave Holbrook to bring in his staff.
Yep.
We shouldn't have any outsiders that he's not worked with before or someone who he doesn't want to work with. Yes, we might be thinking that Shane Flanagan, he's won a premiership with Cronulla. That's fine, but he might not fit with Holbrook. Just let Holbrook bring in who he wants. That's what's best for the club.
Mm-hmm. Now, these next two I'm writing off on the basis, Oz, that their coaches are too influential, and that's the Seagulls and the Storm. I don't see them needing another head coach there.
No chance.
Newcastle Knights, Adam O'Brien. Would he be interested in having a head coach under him as the assistant?
He might be interested. However, it might turn into a bit of a situation that we were just talking about at Cronulla. There's less chance of this happening, obviously, because Flanagan is a bit more foreign to the playing group.
Yeah.
But I think we'll find the experience of Flanagan over O'Brien might sway the players' opinions a bit and look to Flanagan a bit more as the mentor, which could alienate O'Brien in a sense, and then we could end up with a situation similar to what happened with Nathan Brown at the end of this season, where the team just didn't play for him.
Yeah. Now, this one's interesting, Oz. The Warriors. I don't think this move will be based or financially, because the Warriors are about to be bought by a very rich company. I think they could afford to pay Flano if they wanted to. And if Kearney continued to, I guess, not make the top 8, they do have a ready-made coach there, and it would be more likely the NRL would approve it. If not, you slap interim on him. The New Zealand Warriors. But would Flano want to move over there? That's the big thing.
Possibly. We don't really know what Flanagan's thinking right now. He might be happy just to be, offered the job there. However, when thinking about it, and I'm trying not to be disrespectful to Stephen Kearney here, but I know it'll come off that way. If they bring Flanagan into the squad as the assistant coach, I think that's basically saying to Stephen Kearney, we're going to sack you in a year or two.
Yeah.
Because the plan will be to bring Flanagan up, and behind the scenes, Flanagan will sort of take ownership as well. And, I think, we haven't really heard talks that Stephen Kearney's job's in trouble, and he's lucky to have not heard that next season. A bit of a prediction here. I'm actually at the moment in my head tipping the Warriors to finish last.
Okay.
And they could be in a bit of trouble. Obviously, I'll go more in depth when we get closer to the season. Maybe my opinion will be changed by then. However, Stephen Kearney is in a bit of trouble, and bringing in Shane Flanagan would definitely not help that.
North Queensland Cowboys, I'm going to say yes. They could use anything to refresh up there at the moment.
Definitely. And look, with the rumours that Paul Green could be on the out, sometimes they're a bit more prominent. Sometimes the rumours, go away for a bit. However, there is that sort of vibe that Paul Green could be exiting the Cowboys. If he did, you bring Flanagan in as the assistant, possibly bring in the current assistant or someone within the staff to take on the head coaching role. And at least there, the rookie coach has an experienced coach to help him out.
In his corner, yeah.
Yeah.
Well said. Parramatta Reels, I'm going to say no. I think in Brad Arthur we trust.
No. But you could potentially ask me this question at the end of next season and possibly change my answer. Now, I'm still tipping Parramatta to make the top 8 next year, and I think you know what I'm talking about. I believe you said it was a bit pessimistic, which it might be, looking at things on the more negative side, but I just keep thinking about it. Parramatta finished 4th in 2017, finished last in 2018. The main thing Parramatta have got to get right in 2020 in the preseason is working out what went wrong in that 2018 preseason for them to have such a drop. Bringing that back to Shane Flanagan, though, Shane Flanagan's not really experienced that at Cronulla. Obviously winning the premiership in 2016 and going on to make the finals again the next season. And then the season after that, there's not really been an issue with the club dropping right off.
Yep.
So if you brought him back in, that would help. However, I don't think it's that major an issue at this point in time where the Eels need to obstruct what's going on.
Yep. Penrith Panthers, well, we won't even talk about them because Trent Barrett is essentially a head coach there as an assistant. Rabbitohs, we're not going to discuss that, guys. Same as Seagulls and Storm. Wayne Bennett has his own ready-made assistant there, and Jason Demetrio. St. George Illawarra Dragons, I'm saying a big yes because I don't think Mary has that much longer at the club, but it's dependent on what Gus Gould finds with his review, I suppose.
Mm. And apparently, Shane Flanagan's actually from the area. Grew up as a St. George junior, I believe, or maybe it was an Illawarra junior. I think I heard someone on Fox say that, which I didn't know, and I think he got his start at the Dragons too. So there's a bit of history there. And, of course, Wollongong is not that far away from Cronulla. So, there is that connection there. Flanagan might not have to move so far. And with the Sharks actually moving to Cogra for a season next year, the Dragons will likely play most of their games in Wollongong, which is around where Flanagan's based right now. So that is a real possibility. And with the coaching issue, as you brought up.
Sydney Roosters, they just lost their assistant coach, Adam O'Brien, and his son is headed to the club. For those reasons, I'm going to say it's a small chance, even though Trent Robinson is an influential coach who doesn't necessarily need a strong assistant, it seems.
Small chance, but don't expect it to happen. That's what I'm going to say, because there are suitors like the Dragons who are
and also, we have to remember Craig Fitzgibbon is being weighed up as a head coach, and he's still an assistant there. And last but not least, I'm going to rule this one out. West Tigers. I think Madge Maguire's too proud and headstrong and really wants the club to head in his direction and no one else's.
Yeah, and look, when he started out at South Sydney, had a bad season or two, but really developed a nice squad that went on and won the grand final. There wasn't really any intervention there. Mm-hmm. He was left to build his squad and take them to the grand final, and I think the Tigers want to replicate that.
All right, let's move on to tackle 3 now. After discussing Flanagan there, we'll briefly touch. I think the ones we think are most likely, Warriors, potentially Cowboys and Dragons, and obviously the Bulldogs as well.
Yeah, I'd say Dragons front runners.
There we go. All right, so now we'll move on to tackle 3. And let's talk sin binning, Oz, because there was a little bit of controversy over the weekend, I suppose. When is there a round of NRL where there's not controversy these days? But a little bit of talk now. The NRL are going to consider bringing back the 5-minute sin bin. Now, I'm sure you remember, it would have been early this year, we discussed it on the podcast, and I believe you were in favour of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I feel like we desperately need to bring in, and it'll answer all the questions and fix all the controversies. However, I'm not against it. It might solve a couple of issues, but if we bring it in, I'm fine with it. If we don't, I'm fine. It's not going to fix anything major. We'll be still sitting here every week talking about something controversial.
Yeah. Well, look, I was heavily in favour for it, and I think the premises and sort of the basis of how it will be determined is intent. And it's something you said. You said Cameron Smith needed to be sin bin because he had the intent to hurt another player. And I agree with that. Although it was a slap, that's a 10-minute sin bin.
Yeah.
In comparison, let's look at the Jake Trbojevic sin bin. Now, this is only my opinion, and a lot of people disagree with this. I don't think he had intent to stop Gagai, to deny him a try-scoring opportunity. And in fact, Jake's since come out and said he didn't mean to do it, and Gagai has since come out and said he was surprised that it actually was a sin bin. Yeah, when I put all that together, would you agree that there just didn't seem like the intent was there? Yeah. And that's a situation where maybe a 5-minute sin bin would be appropriate.
Possibly. I think as well, at that point, he had just grabbed Gagai. There was no physical harm. There was no inkling that was physical harm. I could grab your shirt right now. Wouldn't really hurt. Wouldn't really cause harm. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing as well. If Jake Trbojevic had grabbed him and then swung an arm or something, that is then the intent to harm someone else. Mm-hmm. I think Gagai might have taken a little bit of a dive as well.
Yeah,
tripped over his own feet.
Which it looked like he was off balance, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? I guess I can understand the referees going with that sin binning decision because Gagai fell over. I think if we're talking about Trbojevic grabbing onto Gagai and he's staying upright, I don't think Trbojevic gets that sin bin. Mm-hmm. However, because of what happened and, he fell over and, it looked a little bit dramatic, I can understand the referee sin binning Trbojevic, although I don't think it was fair. Just on the short sin bin as well, I think I saw it on your page, a quote from Andrew Voss, who said he believed we should bring in an 8-minute sin bin.
He wants that on the premises that that's 1/5 of a quarter. So it's not he thinks it'll be not a massive change, but it'll be slightly less of a reaction for a sin bin. But 2 minutes, I mean, that's one set with the ball, one without. I don't think it'll make a difference.
Yeah, look, I love Vossi, all right? I love him, but I think it's too minimal a change. You don't really change too much. It's only 2 minutes. As you said, that's just one set with that's just one less set with the ball.
Yeah. Particularly the defense. Yeah. I mean, it's 60 seconds extra you got to defend pretty much.
Exactly.
It won't make a difference.
Yeah, and again, as well, if we bring it in, it won't make that much of a difference. I'm fine if we do. If we don't, that's fine as well. I prefer if we were going to change it to have that 5 minutes in bin. And, that's a situation where it would have been justifiable, I think, for Jake Trbojevic. I think anything, even if it doesn't connect, even if it's soft, if there is an intent, that's 10 minutes in the bin. Because you think about it, what Cameron Smith did, yes, he might have got him over the head, but I don't know about you, but to me, it looked like he intended to slap Reid Marnie right in the face. We have little kids at home growing up. Who is our number one player in the NRL? Who is the franchise man of our league? It's Cameron Smith. Kids growing up, they know they love Cameron Smith. They idolise him. I'm not saying every kid's going to go out and slap someone across the face in grassroots on the weekend, but it just takes one to watch Cameron Smith and think, if Cameron Smith can do that and get away with it, why can't I?
Yeah, certainly a good point you raised. So would you agree, before we move on, that a 5-minute sin bin could work as long as it was used when there was no intent, but a significant rule was broken?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's sort of meeting a fine line, meeting in the middle. It makes sense.
Just for one more example, quickly come to my mind, the Nick Kotrick tackle earlier in the year where he dumped, I think it was Tim Laffey on his head.
Yeah.
I don't think that was intentional, so I think that would also be a 5-minute sin bin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, though. There will always be the controversy, because then if someone gets sent for 5, the other fans will be like, oh, it was in 10, it was a 10. It's a tough sword, a tough one, but I mean, I don't see anything bad coming from it. I just see people sort of using it as a bit of a cop-out like we already see. Tackle 4, Will Chambers on the bench again this weekend, Oz. Can you guess what his contract is? How much would you think Will Chambers is currently on a year?
He wouldn't be on $1 million, I know that. But he wouldn't be under 500,000. So I'm going to say around 650, 700K.
700K, perfect. He's on 700K for this year and next year. So clubs can officially approach him in about a month and a week from now. I don't think they will. I think the Storm are going to have to shop him around here. But I'm also hearing there's no guarantee Curtis Scott will be there next year. Now, I can't name the player, but when I put up a post saying that sources have revealed to me that the St. George Illawarra Dragons are interested in him, which, by the way, they're not just interested in him, they're interested in Nene McDonald and basically any outside back at this stage. A Storm player messaged me and said, where did you hear this? I said, is it not true? We got talking and he said he has a huge table on the offer from overseas rugby that he's weighing up. Now, whether he takes that or not, there's no guarantee Curtis Scott will be there next year.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you, does Will Chambers' future depend on Curtis Scott? And if Curtis Scott stays, does Will Chambers leave?
I think Will Chambers will end up leaving. I think Super League, overseas rugby union contract on the table or not, the Melbourne Storm will want to keep Curtis Scott, and they'll prioritise keeping Curtis Scott. The younger player, he's now had grand final experience, big game experience, played a bit in Q Cup this year. Yes, we know that, but performed amazingly when he was there from all accounts.
Oh, definitely. And the fact that they only lost one game in the regular season with Scott there. This final series, he's obviously with the Storm. They've lost 2 in the finals. So they've lost more finals games without Scott than they lost all year with him, which is just, I mean, I don't think it's ever been done before. That's how crazy that is.
Yeah. So with Curtis Scott coming in, I think he stays in. I can't see him dropping back to the Sunshine Coast Falcons next season. I was about to say this season, but they're out. Go the Burleigh Bears, Titans Feeder Club.
Yeah.
I think Chambers has to go overseas, right? Or He does have a past in professional rugby. I
Yeah.
believe it was overseas. He
He played for
was
Queensland Reds as well.
Queensland. Yeah, so there is the potential
Hmm.
he could go to a Super Rugby side. And I tell you what, just quietly, I'm thinking Super Rugby are a bit upset that they have lost Israel Folau. Obviously, it was
Their choice,
a
but
decision
not
they
their
had to
choice.
make. Yeah, it was a morality choice. However, they're thinking we don't have this mainstream star from rugby league in our competition anymore because I'm not trying to shit all over Super Rugby or whatever, but they're homegrown stars. For example, Kurtley, Bill, Quade Cooper, they've got nothing on a Cameron Smith or a Jonathan Thurston,
Hmm.
So they're just waiting for another NRL player to poach, and I don't think they'll mind bringing Will Chambers in. It'll be a front page story for at least a couple of days because Will Chambers is making that move back to Super Rugby. So I could see him going to a Waratahs or a Reds. It's important as well for Australian rugby, if a rugby union side is going to get Chambers, that it is an Australian rugby union side.
Hmm. The only
I
NRL
think that's
clubs
where it
I
goes.
potentially see him going to, Bulldogs. We know they're pretty desperate for talent. I think the Warriors, they're always desperate for Aussies. I think the Cowboys, they need a bit of strike out wide. He does have Indigenous ties, so I suppose he would be close with a lot of the boys up there. But I can't really see any other club. Even if the Storm, I think even if the Storm fork out 200k, I don't think a lot of clubs sign him for 500. And, a move to the Warriors, a move anywhere because he's in Melbourne currently, it would need to be longer than 2 years for him to be worth it. He wouldn't take a 1 year somewhere. He would
Possibly
just...
a deal that he would accept for less, I'd say, is possibly the Cowboys, just because he is from Queensland as his ties there. However, I don't even know if the Cowboys offer him a deal because he is, getting on a bit, and that they desperately need outside backs. So I think it's overseas
Yeah.
or to Super Rugby.
And a lot of people would make the argument that Will Chambers can just dig his heels in and stay at the Storm in reserve grade for 700k. And to that, I would say true, but false. Because he definitely can do that. Why would he not? I mean, he has a contract. He can sit in reserve grade for 700k. But the problem is, the year after, he will be 32, entering his last chance to earn a professional contract for big money. I would hope maybe a Super League deal, 3 years, take him through to 35, set him up for life. But if you've played a whole year of reserve grade, you greatly reduce your value as a player. Greatly.
And the thing is as well, the Storm aren't going to be too keen on paying someone 7 or the East Tigers, you know what I mean?
And in actual fact, it's just kind of my mind, Oz. If he doesn't play more than half the NRL games next year, he wouldn't qualify for Super League. They don't give reserve grade players visas anymore over there. I know this because reserve grade players are trying to go to the Super League and they're being denied visas. Then I've been talking to them. So I think he could go to the Super League now because obviously he's just played more than half the previous year. But if he doesn't make this decision soon, the next season ticks over and he hasn't qualified for his half games, then Will Chambers will be stuck to Australian clubs only. And that's where Super Rugby, like you said, appears to be his last chance. But that's all really I've got on that. Have you got anything further, or we'll move on to tackle 5?
Not really. Just one thing I want to say. If he is going to Super League or Super Rugby, I actually think he's got a better Super Rugby. He's got the ties there. And I feel like when I'm thinking of Super League sides right now, it's not as much in the past where there's such a demand for NRL players over in the Super League. They're obviously growing amazing talent. As we've seen, talent has come over here. So I think there will be more teams desperately chasing Will Chambers in a Super Rugby, especially the Australian teams, than in the Super League. So that's just my tip there.
Tackle 5, preliminary finals this weekend. Friday night, sellout, GIO Stadium. Yours truly will hold one of those tickets. Well, 2. Well, a couple because I'm going with friends. But anyway, Raiders, I can see here, are $1.40 favourite against the Rabbitohs. Do you think that's we're riding off the Rabbitohs a little bit, or do you think that's deserved?
I think that's deserved, and I think Canberra are going to win this one pretty easily. And you know what? That's not going to be anything against the Rabbitohs. That is purely because Canberra, they're at home. I'm going to say that this is the closest they've been to a grand final in 25 years. Yes, A couple of years ago, they faced the Melbourne Storm and lost by 2 points, but that was in Melbourne. I feel like this gives them a bit of an advantage, similar to what we saw Parramatta get against Brisbane a couple of weeks ago. 29,000 at Bankwest Stadium. It was a sea of blue and gold, and I can tell you from being there, the atmosphere probably added 12 more points at least onto that scoreline. And I can see that happening with Canberra here. If we were talking in the regular season at ANZ Stadium, I think South Sydney are in with a better chance. However, GIO Stadium preliminary final, 25 years of pent-up Canberrian frustration, 30,000 Canberrians in the crowd, plus Clarkey. We've got the green sausages happening. Are you going to grab yourself a sausage, surely?
Well, that I was about to say, that's sort of like a grand final thing. You start doing all that stuff in the community, but that shows how much, I guess, it means to the Raiders fans down here.
Yeah.
Because it has been so long. But I will say, I don't think we should write the Rabbitohs off. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm tipping the Raiders because they are such a strong defensive side that they won't give you 34 points like the Seagulls did to the Rabbitohs. They'll give you 1 or 2 tries. In fact, I believe the last 2 times they played the Melbourne Storm, who are statistically a better attacking side in every area than the Rabbitohs, they've only been able to score 1 try each game against the Raiders.
Yeah.
Is that worrying signs for Wayne Bennett? Probably, particularly when you factor in Raiders are the fresher side. But the beauty about rugby league, and I always say this, is we can sit here and say why a team will win and give you a million reasons. It doesn't matter once you hit the paddock. Anyone can win.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of our sport. So I am very, very excited for that game. And I think the Rabbitohs drove down today. Wayne Bennett told them, just get your own way down here.
Yeah, individually. I heard about this last night at first, and it's a bit of an odd one to me. So basically, Wayne Bennett has reportedly told his side that they will be going down to Canberra 48 hours early, 2 days before the game, which usually we see, drive down on game day or the night before. And they're not travelling as a group on the team bus. They've been asked to get their own way there. Now, it is a little odd to me, and I did say this in the post I made. However, I believe surely Wayne Bennett's got a plan, and I think it could be one of 2 things. One, acclimatising. We know that Canberra, the weather's usually a little bit different.
Yep.
I'm not so sure. Well, you'd know more than me. You're actually currently there.
Yeah.
How's the weather in Canberra currently? I'll just ask you that.
Disgusting. It's always disgusting. It's either too hot or too cold.
What's it right now?
Right now, let me check on my phone. 17 degrees at the moment, but trust me, once it goes night, that'll drop.
That'll drop
heavily. It's a different cold in Canberra too.
Yeah,
and it's a bone chilling cold, man. Like when I go, my car is literally right there next to me, parked next to me from this window. Yeah. I could turn my laptop and show you, but I can't be bothered. Sorry, guys. But when I open that doors and I take literally 4 steps to my car, every morning I'm literally like, oh, what the fuck? Like, it's a bone-chilling cold. You don't even want to walk to the car. It is coming out of winter now, so it's not going to be that cold.
Yeah.
But it ain't going to be nice for the Rabbitohs. I can assure you that.
That's the thing I wanted to point to. Currently here in Western, I'm probably just less than an hour out from ANZ, so South Sydney territory, the Rabbitohs territory. It's quite a nice day. There is a bit of a breeze. However, it's sort of it's a nice cool breeze. It's sort of cooling me off a little bit of a night. I've realised because I've been checking my phone overnight, I've been tossing and turning under the covers because I've still got the big blanket on because it's been too hot overnight. Okay. It's been too hot for me, and we'll have a bit of a cold front in the very middle of the night for about 2 hours, but then it'll start heating up again. So that's the thing I'm talking about, acclimatizing his side to the environment because it's going to be cold. I'd say tonight or tomorrow night they'll have a night training session. They'll have a session when it is cold, probably around the time of kickoff at about 8 p.m. Have a nighttime training session just to acclimatise to the environment. That's one of the reasons I think they're going down early. Another reason, and this is the reason for the team travelling as individuals, and I'm sort of stretching a bit here. I'm just trying to find out why they wouldn't travel as a group. Bennett might realise, okay, if I say find your own way there, certain players will group together, go down in cars full of 5, 4-hour drive, plenty of time to sort of build chemistry within that little group. Players are getting together with other players that they want to travel with, that they're mates with. It'll give a positive energy, I'd say, as
Yeah.
well. And
Just
again, I'm
something
just
different,
stretching
something
here. But
fresh.
yeah, exactly. And it'll sort of help the morale of the players when they get to Canberra. I'm not sure if they're in Canberra right now. I'd say they would have left earlier this morning, so I'd say they'd be
Hopefully.
about there now. But
Funny
yeah,
you mentioned.
these are sort of the reasons I can find for this happening.
I was about to say, funny you mentioned that because I actually might send Damien Cook a message after this and see if I can add a little bit of a Raiders jumper. Rabbitohs jumper somewhere. Well, there's already a Raiders jumper. That's why I swear I saw the Raiders one. Well, there is a Rabbitohs one, but it's from the 80s, and I don't know. I don't like it. I'm not being disrespectful by this. It's purely because of my age. I don't know anyone on it, so it's not.
Ziggy Niscott. I think that's how it's said. He's like a cult hero from the Rabbitohs.
Well, maybe he's on it. Maybe. I don't know. I'd need to take it in somewhere to get it. But let's move on to the second game. Roosters versus Storm at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Roosters have only lost one game there all year. Storm are coming off a win. Rabbitohs, there I go again. I don't know my bloody teams. Roosters are coming off an even bigger win.
Yeah.
Wait, are they? No, 32-0. They won by 24. Okay, they're both coming off huge wins. I don't know my scores. I should just retire. I won't have to retire right here. But
what are we talking about?
Yeah, how many goals did the 76ers get in the golf last weekend? I'm going to lean slightly with the Storm here. I can see they're $2.40. They're an outside chance. I don't know. I just feel the Roosters have got them the last few times, and I think the Storm will be so determined to send Cooper Cronk out a loser. If Cooper Cronk gets another win over them, that's like, I don't know, for Cameron Smith, someone who's such a great competitor, that would be humiliating to him. It shouldn't be, because he has nothing to be ashamed of, but because he's so competitive, I think he would view that as humiliating. Without Jared Rea-Hargreaves, I see the Melbourne Storm seizing the middle. When we look at people that can come in and have an early hit up, I think Olam, Vunivalu, and Addo-Carr are better at that than Tupou, Latrell, and Morris. That's my opinion. And I think without Jared Rea-Hargreaves there, the Storm here have a really great chance to win the middle. And once they do that and Cameron Smith hits second gear, usually, as far as NRL will show us this year, it's good night. The Storm take over, get to their process, and it's game over.
I agree with everything you have just said. However, I'm just leaning towards the Sydney Roosters. Okay. And you know what? I think I can understand your reasons for picking Melbourne. I'm sure you can. The Roosters, it's such a close game. It will undoubtedly be close. I think they're gonna be neck and neck all the way. I'm just going with the Roosters here. You have brought up the Rea-Hargreaves point, and they're not too good without him. However, I think when we're talking about a prelim final, a team like the Sydney Roosters, no matter who they're up against, if they have an influential player out, other influential players will step up and ensure that if they're going to lose, that won't be the reason.
Well, that actually brings me to my next point. Takiaho's starting again. Coming back from injury, hasn't been his best, but how's these for some stats? So the Roosters lost one game out of their opening 9. That was the one game he wasn't there because he averaged 53 minutes, 200 meters, 25 tackles a game, and made 24 tackle breaks. In those games, he only missed one tackle. Those are some crazy stats, you know what I mean? Could he be the difference? Sure. Would I prefer Jared Rea-Hargreaves because he's an experienced leader of the club? Yeah, I probably would, but I'm not quaking in my boots over his replacement. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and also just another point up to sort of have a rebuttal. The Storm will be determined to send Cooper Cronk out a loser, but you know what? I think the Roosters will be just a little bit more determined to send him out a winner. Just to counteract your argument sort of a bit there.
Yep.
And also my big reasoning, obviously we found out that last year before the grand final, weeks before the grand final, Trent Robinson started formulating a plan for the Melbourne Storm because, he was certain that they were going to meet either in the prelim or the grand final, and it worked. They were the better side for 80 minutes, and I don't think we've seen, obviously not as much on the scoreboard, but we haven't seen the Melbourne Storm sort of dominated to that extent in a big game
No.
for a long time. So I think personally, what I would sort of theorize that Robinson's been doing, I'd say I 100% guarantee he's been formulating another plan again in the past few weeks, because don't fix what isn't broke, right? However, I would go out on a limb and say since round one, every couple of weeks, maybe every 2 weeks, every month or so, he's gotten a group of his staff, they've sat down and they've reviewed Melbourne games, and they've made an ever-changing game plan for the Melbourne Storm if they were to meet down the line.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to implement that plan this week. I don't think it's going to be the exact same as last year in the grand final, because the Storm have changed a lot. However, I think Robinson will have them prepared and ready, and they'll surprise the Melbourne Storm here. I don't think it'll be as dominant a victory. However, I think they'll just get over the line.
My final tips, I'm going to go Raiders by 8 and Storm by 2.
I'm going to go Raiders by 24. I know it's a bit rude to South Sydney fans, but when you think about it, we've tipped a lot of games to be close this final series, and we have seen a few absolute belters. I'm actually tipping the belter for this one, and I'm tipping the Sydney Roosters by 4 or 6. I don't think it'll be decided by a penalty goal or a field goal. I think it'll be a case where the Sydney Roosters are 4 to 6 points in front, and they hold out the Melbourne Storm for the last 20 or so minutes.
Okay, let's move on to Tackle 6. Our MVP for each side this season. So we'll go through each team, guys. Starting off with the Brisbane Broncos, I've got Payne Haas, and my reasoning is, how can you not?
Yeah. I think we can move on. We both agree.
Yep. Raiders. I've gone with John Bateman, slightly over Chance Nickel-Klogstad, but I just love Bateman. He's so gritty. He can play on the edge and do his thing if you need, or he can come in the middle and just show perseverance and so much character.
I've got Bateman and CNK down because I was going to choose whichever one. They both deserve the same credit. So I'll go Chance. He's brought a different dynamic to the fullback role. I'll admit, at the start of the season, I thought, okay, Nickel-Klogstad will start at fullback. The Jack Whiten experiment will fail. Nickel-Klogstad will get dropped to the Mounties as a result, and we won't hear from him again this season. Boy, was I wrong. Just added an attacking flair. He's improved his own game from when he was at the Warriors. He's really proven that he is a first-grade player. And whilst Bateman's shown a little bit of leadership in the forward pack, in attack, and a great defensive effort, we've seen that X factor and attacking flair from Nickel-Klogstad that we haven't seen a player from the Canberra Raiders, especially in that middle, in that spine, have for a while.
Bulldogs, I've gone with Corey Harawira-Naera. The fact he was dropped to reserve grade at a stage of this season was dumbfounding for me. I think he's their best attacking weapon by far.
I've gone with a little bit of an outside choice here. I've stuck with the man Lachie Lewis. Maybe this is based a little bit off potential still. When he has played first grade, I think, especially in the last few weeks, he went a little bit underrated for the Bulldogs. He's done a good job controlling the side. I think he's learnt a little bit more control this season. He's basically been forced to as well at the Bulldogs, I would say. And, I'm not going to mince around. He hasn't had the best season. However, I think he's set himself on a good platform to go from here. And I tell you what, I don't think he'll be getting dropped at all in 2020. If he does, Dean Pay's a crazy, crazy man.
Well, he was crazy this year. Cronulla Sharks, I went with Josh Morris. Really, he's my most improved and my most valuable for them this year.
Yeah, well, I'm going with my most improved. Well, Chad Townsend, obviously, we have seen him develop from a role-playing half to a person who can control the side. He won the Sharks Player of the Year. The main reason I've gone for him for my MVP is, I'm going to be honest, he doesn't have as much talent as certain individuals in the side, raw talent. Mm-hmm. But he's been there the whole season, and even when they were full with injuries, he stepped up and put in an effort, and he did lead the side. And I tell you what, although they bad results, I think he softened the blow a bit. So I think due to him being there the whole season, overall, for majority of the season, I say he's been their best player. Maybe that's because certain players were out, possibly, but he's done a good job since he's come in as that main man. So I'll give Townsend the props there.
For the Titans, I was split between Jai Arrow and AJ Brimson. But I'll go AJ Brimson just for the fact he was forced to step up and develop his game a lot more, whereas Arrow was just sort of required to be consistent in the middle.
I've literally got the exact same two players down and pretty much the same reason.
Yeah.
Arrow wasn't there for the whole season. He was clearly the Titans' best player while he was there, putting in a consistent effort. However, when Arrow was out, everyone sort of looked to Brisbane, to Brimson, as that main man, as the guy who is going to put in that effort. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit unfair because of how young he was, and a Titan shouldn't have to rely on one player for individual effort. Everyone putting in effort, and it didn't come off all the time, obviously, but he did well under the pressure. So AJ Brimson.
Sea Eagles, I've gone with Daly Cherry Evans. So many great performers in that side all year, but he was consistent, he was their leader, and he done his job every single week that he was there.
I'm going to go with Jake Trbojevic.
Good choice.
Again, obviously not the leader as Cherry Evans is, but I tell you what, if Cherry Evans is the leader of the back line, he's got to be the leader in that forward pack, not even leading by his word, but leading by example as well. He seems a very mature and responsible player, and you can see that on the field as well. Look, we could have gone Tom Trbojevic here, and we'll have comments for him. Didn't play enough, I don't think. And you know what? Although he really added a lot while he was there, the Seagulls have proven, even when he was out earlier this season, they can cope without Tom Trbojevic. They can. Brendan Elliott, for the most part, had a great season. I'm not trying to take anything away here from Tom Trbojevic. He definitely added to the side when he was there and kicked them into second gear. But, we've now learnt that when Tom Trbojevic isn't in the Seagull side, it's not wave the white flag and surrender. It's let's put in an even bigger effort. So that's why he misses out for me.
I think it's mind-blowing that Tommy's still 22 years old. What the hell? I thought he'd be like at least 25. He's crazy. For the Storm, I've gone with Jerome Hughes on the premises that he has been a fullback all year, and I've not once said, holy crap, they really miss Billy Slater. And I consider Billy Slater the greatest fullback I've ever seen.
Yeah, I've gone with Cameron Smith.
Yeah, see, I knew it.
Yeah, one of us was going to have to say Cameron Smith. I also considered Munster, Hughes, and Brandon Smith as well, just because we've seen such a unique way that he's been used when he comes onto the field, and he really adds to that side. And I tell you what, although Cameron Smith is possibly the greatest player of all time and is the greatest hooker of just this generation, I'm confident that once he eventually retires, the next season, I definitely won't be thinking, wow, the Melbourne Storm miss Cameron Smith, because I think Brandon Smith will really step up. And you know what? He's been mentored by Cameron Smith. So, what can you really say to that? He is going to be amazing. However, I'm going with the Munster on this one. With Brady Croft not really having that controlling halves aura to his game, we've had to see Cameron Smith step up a bit and control sort of as a third half. And whilst at hooker, we've also seen Brandon Smith do that to a lesser extent. So Cameron Smith sort of had to play two roles here this season, which we haven't seen him have to do too much in the past. That's really impressed me. So I've got to go with Cameron Smith.
Knights, I've gone with David Clemmer. I thought he was really consistent. His numbers were there all year. His effort was there all year. And, Mitchell Pearce had better individual games, but he also had worse individual games. Yeah. Whereas I never really said, wow, Clemmer played shit today. But similarly, I never really said, wow, Clemmer played out of his skin today. He did a very, very good job all year.
I have to agree to a certain extent, and I know this sounds crazy because I usually criticize just because when they were winning, it was because of Pearce, because he was having blinders, amazing performances. Mm-hmm. When they weren't playing well, it was generally because of Pearce too. That just shows the influence he has on the club, on the playing group, I should say more specifically. And his efforts, although it was for a short period of time and he did have a bad season other than that, he had a monster few weeks and is still seen to this day as the lead guy on the field for the Knights. They still rely on him the exact same. So I do think he just gets my MVP for the Knights only because they've been so reliant on him. I believe if certain players had taken a bit more ownership and responsibility throughout the season, this would be a different story. But because they've been so reliant on Pearce, it's hard for me, especially in that back line, to give it to anyone else.
Yeah, can't argue with that. For the Warriors, I don't think we really need to discuss this. It's Tuivasa-Sheck clearly. Maybe Ken Mamalo second. We agree on that?
Yeah, I think so. Look, and I'm going to be negative, pessimistic. I think Tuivasa-Sheck could have even had a better season this year. Was clearly the Warriors' best player. During games would come up with some amazing plays. However, he did have a few negatives to his game as well that didn't help. I can remember multiple occasions him, coming under a high ball and knocking the ball on and that. Human error. He is still a human, but I guess I'm just putting the challenge out there to RTS. I know he does need some help, but next season, I think he should focus a little bit more on his individual game as well, and that might possibly help the side a bit. But he's in desperate need of help. You put him in most other sides, and he excels.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine him playing behind the Roosters forward pack.
Yeah.
Or any forward pack, really, that's just consistent. Cowboys, I've gone with Josh Maguire. Played more games than Tamalolo, and he had a massive influence on both sides of the field. I'm talking, offensively, he still had over 100 metres every game. You still got that out of him, which isn't as much as Tamalolo, but defensively, Maguire was a rock. He was the stable of their defence this year.
Yeah, I think early this year as well, when Taumalolo was out initially, Maguire really stepped up and to me was the Cowboys' best player. However, I have gone with Jason Taumalolo. I think you can see why as well. All props to Josh Maguire. However, just sort of the influence he has on that side as well, similar to Pearce, although not as strong. And he's just an absolute wrecking ball as well. His talent has been unrivaled at the Cowboys this season when he is on the field. Jason Taumalolo.
For the Eels, I've gone with Mitch Moses. I'm assuming you've got the same.
Yeah, I have. And, we did see him have that little drop-off. It was actually quite a big drop-off against the Melbourne Storm. And I just want to give that as an example as to why I think he can still improve his game and get a bit more consistent. But we also need to take into account that it was the Melbourne Storm he was up against. He's definitely improved, and I'm hopeful that he will continue to improve next season. If I gave Tuivasa-Sheck a little bit of a challenge that he has to work on his individual game a bit more and shore that up, the mistakes, I'm going to give a challenge to Mitchell Moses. Build on that consistency. He's going up, and if he continues to go up, he's going to be one of the best halves in the game, period, not just this season.
Panthers, I went James Fisher-Harris. Just felt he was probably the most consistent of a poor bunch this year.
Yep, definitely the most consistent. Fisher-Harris always put in effort every single game. I would say there were stints where other players were playing better than him. For example, James Maloney. However, that wasn't consistent for the whole season. Nathan Cleary as well had a couple of really good games. Again, wasn't consistent for the whole season. Just trying to think of other players. Maybe James Tarmo challenges him for this award. However, I think Fisher-Harris showed a little bit more talent as well in doing so than Tarmo and got better results for the Panthers. He is going to be crucial to their side next season. And I think if he can continue this, consistent form, with a couple of pieces at the Panthers performing a bit better, he's going to be a star.
For the Rabbitohs, I've gone with Damien Cook just because everything of their attack revolves around him.
Yeah, Damien Cook. Yes, Cam Murray's had an impressive. The one player I think has not had a single bad game this season or has actively played poor is Damien Cook. Even when Parramatta, even when South Sydney were playing poor, he was still getting in good opportunities, still trying to create. His teammates just weren't taking advantage.
For the Dragons, I've gone with Paul Vaughan. Again, probably the most consistent of a poor bunch.
Yeah, I was thinking of Varney, but I have in the end gone with McInnes. I think he's gone a little under the radar because of the Dragons' poor season, and he wasn't
Yep.
necessarily seen as one of their top players last season anyway. And again, I think it's an issue of he's still in the Cam Smith generation with Damien Cook on par or above Cam Smith currently. Um, Cam McInnes really does go under the radar a bit. So at the Dragons, I'll give him his props.
Yeah, you're right. He had second most tackles in the entire comp this year. Roosters, we don't really need to discuss that either. Obviously, we got Teddy.
Yep.
And Tigers, I've gone with Ryan Madison. I thought he was their best this year. Thought he was consistent on defense. I probably think he should have debuted for the Blues. He didn't, but I just thought he was fantastic for him. I thought he was their best player by far.
Yeah, I agree with you. So that's why someone else. Corey Thompson, I think.
Good call.
A little bit not underutilized in terms of the games he played, underutilized in his position. Didn't get to play enough fullback when he was there at fullback. He was solid. I've said this before. He really reminds me of Flash Michael Gordon in the sense that you're not always going to get the X Factor, James Tedesco, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck plays, but he is a safe pair of hands. You know you can rely on him, and he just gets the job done, whether it's nitty-gritty, whether it's showing a little bit of flair, but he is definitely a safe person to have at that fullback role. And I'd argue has been the Tigers' second best player and second most consistent player this season.
Yeah, definitely. He's had an amazing season, guys. That's the Set of Six podcast for the week. We've got preliminary finals up this week. We're back next week. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the grand final and a couple other topics as they develop through the week, guys. Thanks for your ears. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your eyes if you watched on YouTube. And if you could, or if you want to, feel free, and we would encourage it and appreciate it if you could just share it to one friend, one footy friend, show them, hey, have a look at these dickheads, or have a look at these young guys having a go. Whatever you want to say, we would appreciate it, guys. But that's all from me. Thanks for your time again, and I'll hand it over to you, Oz, to say goodbye.
Yeah, guys, of course, next week it'll be the grand final of the Set of Six podcast, so make sure you tune in for that one. I'm sure we'll have plenty of topics, filled to do with the grand final. I'm really excited for it. I hope you guys can join us next week, next Wednesday, and I believe is next Wednesday Dally M night as well.
Yeah, it will be, actually.
So it'll be a bit of a Dally M preview show, I guess, if you will, as well. So make sure you tune in next week. And other than that, just agreeing with Clarkey, share the podcast, let your friends know. I believe, I checked this last week, I don't know if we've changed. We are currently in Australia in terms of sports podcasts, 66. Now, if 66th. Now, if you think that is still a long way off, it is. However, considering that the list is of 200 and we're over half and we're above Stone Cold Bloody Steve Austin, and, I believe we're also above the Fox League podcast, not the Matty Johns one, but the Take Me Now, I've Seen It All podcast, to consider we're above that. It surprised me, and I think we're doing pretty well, and that's all down to you guys. So if you want to see us keep growing, possibly hit that number one spot, take over Matty Johns, then make sure you share with at least one friend. I'll see you guys next time.
That was highly unlikely we'll take over Matty Johns, but what can I say? Let's end it on that note. Screw you, Matty Johns.